knew exactly where he was going to be at exact given time. Now, when Jesus had arrived, it wasn't like this. There wasn't weeks and weeks and weeks of announcements. There wasn't news coverage and media coverage. There wasn't banners and posters hanging up on him being at this graduation or Jesus being in this specific spot at this specific time. However, Jesus did have a warning. The Old Testament was filled with warning that Jesus was coming. Some of the prophets even predicted a pretty relatively good area of time that Jesus would be here. Every book in the Old Testament had said something of the sort of Jesus is coming. So here, the people really didn't have an excuse to say, well, we didn't know Jesus was going to be here. I mean, sure, you didn't know that in the year 33 he was going to be walking in the streets of Jerusalem. However, you did know that he was going to come. So what have you been doing to prepare yourselves? Even the pagan scientists, if you would, of that time, who studied the stars and the earth and the moon, even they could predict that Jesus was coming. They were the first ones in Matthew that said, there's an odd star to the east and we have no idea what's going on. It wasn't a satellite back then. They even knew that something big was about to happen, yet the people acted as if there was no warning. Like we had no idea that Jesus was coming. So the good news is, and was, and will always be, Jesus is coming. Now the bad news, the bad part about this, was the world, including us, did not recognize when Jesus had arrived. In every community, in every society, throughout the entire structure of our world, this still remains true. Jesus was ignored. It still remains true to this very same day, maybe even this very same room, that Jesus was ignored. Now John, and often I talk about the Greek context, and John is important to kind of elaborate on a couple contexts of the Greek. John uses the word for world called cosmos in this verse. Now, in verse 9, it's used 3 times. In verse 10, we'll see it 2 more times. So anytime you study the Bible and you see one word repeated throughout it, especially in the Greek context, which has several different words for one word that we have in English, whenever you see the same Greek word, you know it's important. So what is John getting to when he sees the word or writes the word cosmos in 9 and 10? Well, the significance behind cosmos means it's literally into our realm. So not just the world like our modern Western culture mind thinks of world, but when John is saying cosmos, he's literally saying into our realm. Jesus came into our realm. Kind of like Jesus came into our personal space, our personal bubble, if you would. John is driving home the fact that Jesus was right here in our world. It wasn't that Jesus was this imaginary figure up in space or in the clouds or however we like to see God and Jesus. Jesus was literally in our realm, in our midst, in our touch. Jesus was there in our flesh and in our blood. And for 43 years, the people ignored that fact. For all up until the time when Jesus was crucified, and after that, when the prophets were going out and preaching, when the apostles were spreading the good news, Jesus was still ignored. All of this happened because the world chose not to recognize Jesus. Even in the very midst, in the touch, in the feel, they could not recognize who Jesus was. It was like the feeling when Jesus was present would be like the relationship with a brother or a sister or a spouse. That intimate feeling when you can just sense that maybe they're just in the room. That's the type of relationship that we are called to have with Jesus, that the people, the Jews specifically, were called to have for their God, and yet God was present with them, and they couldn't feel him. So what does that tell us about them? It's not like when you're in the presence of a celebrity or a superstar, and you're like, oh, I know him, or I like to use Tim Tebow, because everyone thinks like, oh, I know Tim Tebow, because he just has so much out there about his life, and he's just a real intimate person. I know Tim Tebow. Well, you don't know him like you know your brother or your sister or your wife or your parents. It's not that intimate connection when you know someone. It's a little bit what John is saying here. The entire planet missed a time when they could have reached out and taken Jesus' hand and said, hi, my name is so-and-so. And the time when Jesus said, hello, my name is Jesus. Think about that for one moment. Just shaking the hands with Jesus and simply hearing, hello, my name is Jesus. Think about our entire span of life here on earth. When Jesus was with us, it started off, there was no room for him at the inn, right? The king hated him. The only people that literally came to visit him on his birth, at his birth, the birth of a king, were who? Shepherds and wise men. Now, what are shepherds? Shepherds are very, very, very low people. They're poor. What were the wise men? The wise men weren't aunt and uncles of Jesus. They were complete strangers. They were people on the outskirts of religion. This tells us a little bit about what Jesus endured in his time on earth. The poor, the foreigners, they came to celebrate his birth, but yet the ones who had been waiting all this time didn't even know. Yet the star was there. Yet all the prophets have been saying, Jesus is coming, the Messiah is coming, the Messiah will be here. Oh, we don't know Jesus is here yet. And all of this concept of what John is saying, we think, oh, things are different. If Jesus walked through these doors today, we think, I would know Jesus. I wish Ryan's not back there, is he? When Ryan had his golden locks, I used to think like, if Jesus walked in here, he would have hair like Ryan's with the golden locks. I used to think, what if Jesus would walk through these doors, and in all reality, if Jesus walked through these doors, he's not going to sit up front with Ashley, and he's not going to sit over here by Brad, because if Jesus walked through these doors, the first place he's going to go is where strangers go, and this is where the strangers sit. No offense, guys. But either you got here late, or you're teaching. This is where the strangers sit. No, Jesus would have came through these doors and sat in the very middle of you. And I wonder, those of you sitting in the middle, if you look to the side and you see this guy with golden locks and this great beard and this smile that would radiate you, and he turned to you and said, hello, my name is Jesus, what would change in your life that very second? Would your life mean any different? Or would you simply do like the people John is describing and say, that's great, and turn the other way? See, in all of this, the people did not receive him, and that is the biggest issue in which John is instructing here. Jesus came to his own planet, the earth, the world that he had created. He came to the very region that God had appointed his people to. He came to his very own people, the Jews, for them, and they did not know him. And those who did recognize him, those of you who sitting in the middle would have said, oh, hey, that's Jesus. They choose not to receive him. Because if they choose to receive him, that means something different would happen in life. If he came and sat in the middle of church, we would probably choose not to receive him, because that would mean something different in our lives would have to be changed. Now, this is probably hard to believe. My wife can vouch for this, but I've been rejected many times in my life, by her specifically. And all of this rejection, it's a little bit about like what Jesus is going through. Jesus was rejected from the time of birth. To every place he had been, he was rejected. Now, even in all of my countless times of being rejected in my life, it does not amount to the feeling that Jesus would have had, being rejected by his own people, the people he had created. I can't imagine that feeling. So what does John want us to receive from all this? What does John want us to learn about what was going on at this time? First, we do not have to be scared about knowing we are in the midst of Jesus. For the shepherds and for the wise man who came to the stable that night, I think they had to be a little bit curious on what was going on. They had to be a little curious. There's a star and it's pointing us here, and then these angels came. We got to poke our head over and see what's going on. Like, this is big. For foreigners and poor people to just come out of their way and say, this Jesus thing is pretty big. I need to go see that. That was a test of their faith. This is our faith. We need to know who Jesus is. We need to take that step of where it comes from wondering who Jesus is, the curiosity of saying, I wonder what's going on in that stable, to literally saying, I am going to go to that stable. I am going to go where Jesus is. It goes from that little curiosity of knowing who Jesus was and knowing what was going on to the desire to actually go and meet him. A few years back, a buddy of mine in college, we were out of college and both working in the computer industry, and we got sent to New Orleans, or we chose to go to New Orleans for a Microsoft Management Summit. Now, that probably doesn't sound interesting to anyone in this room, but it's where all the nerds hang out, and it's like the biggest nerd party in the world. It's where all the Windows and everything gets released in Office. So all of us nerds go down to New Orleans. Now, there's a couple of things that happen when you get a bunch of nerds together. We call it you geek out. So we go down there, and as we're taking this bus, a bus full of nerds, and we're heading down this interstate that goes around the Superdome, which is where the Saints play, and you come around, and all of a sudden, like, every nerd on the bus goes and runs to the right side and goes out the window, and we're, because over to our right was a movie set. Not just any ordinary movie set. For us nerds, we like science fiction. So we asked that we had to double check with this bus driver because we had heard rumors that the filming of the second Planet of the Apes remake was there in New Orleans. And nerds love Planet of the Apes. So, for me and my friend Dean specifically, as we got to our hotel, and we kind of stayed like a block off of Bourbon Street and kind of away from the riffraff, but walking distance to our conference, this is a long ways away from the Superdome, right? So nerds go out of their way to see nerd stuff. So Dean and I get this great idea that we're going to walk about 2.5 miles back to the set of this movie because we want to see this movie. We want to see actors. We want to see the set. We want to touch the stuff. We want to be part of this movie. So there we started walking. I think we put it in our phones, kind of the area of the Superdome, because we knew that was where it was by, and we started walking. Now, we spent, I don't know, probably close to an hour trying to find the place. And when we finally get there, we literally were in awe. You could see over the wall of this barricade, you could see parts of the set. And we wanted to get closer. We wanted to be able to touch. We wanted to be able to feel. We wanted the opportunity to see one of the actors. Go ahead and put the first slide up there. So this was the first thing we seen when we got to this place. And you see it says wardrobe, makeup, hair, to set. Well, when you're looking for famous people, in our minds, we see to set. And I don't know why on one time it's upside down on there. But that's the first thing we seen was to set. So Dean and I, we head off to the set. And now this was like, if you've seen Planet of the Apes, this is like where they take over the town and the cars are all deserted and the buildings are all deserted and everything's going on there. And so this is the area we're in. If you watch the movie, you'll know where I'm talking about. So we get there, and there's a barricade all the way around. Not just like a little yellow construction zone thing, but a wall. Like you can't see over. So we literally walked about 45 blocks in this area, just around and around and around, trying to get a peep in there to see part of the set. And all of this, We had an effort to see something or someone famous, something we knew we would never see here in the Midwest. We'd probably never see unless Kevin Costner makes another awesome movie. We're probably not going to see anything sweet in the Midwest, right? So go ahead and put the next one up there. So finally, we find this little area, like a walkway, with security guards and gates and stuff, and we just walk through it. Like, this is probably like 9 o'clock at night by the time we actually get to this area, and this is what we see. If you can see this is like, there's moss growing over, and it's kind of hard to see, but there's a car in there, and it's cool. It's kind of this eerie set, and like, they're literally on the filming, like, they're about ready to film pretty soon here. So the security guard naturally comes over and says, hey, you guys cannot be here. And us being nice Midwesterners, we start talking to him. And we say, oh, we're from, at that time we were both in South Dakota. We're from South Dakota. We've never seen a movie set in our lives. We never will again. So we just wanted to take a quick look. And he was like, oh, well, why didn't you guys go past makeup? That's where all the actors are. So literally that first picture I showed you, it had all the arrows. That was directions. And all we seen was a sign that said, to the set. So we spent hours walking around looking for something that was right in front of us in the first place. We walked all the way around this block trying to catch a glimpse into what we could see in front of us, the set. But yet, all the actors were just hanging out in one big circle eating donuts. This is a little bit about the desire we should have for Jesus. We walk around life and we try to see, we look into the places that we think Jesus should be, and yet we don't see him. We have this desire just to catch a glimpse, to feel him, to touch him, to be part of something big. And yet in that end, that desire turns into something that could hurt us. Like we become so desperate to know Jesus that we forget who we're actually looking for. Now when we finally got to that spot where we could see in and where we were caught and where we became in awe of the scene and the security guard came and all of this had happened, we finally realized that if we would have just looked at the first sign and we would have followed the first sign, we would have literally walked into the circle of actors just being normal people. Just eating donuts with no security around them at all. This is what John was explaining. We come to church, maybe some of you come once or twice a year, and maybe some of you come 2 to 3 times a week. Yet we come in these doors and we rush because we see or we think or we know where Jesus is going to be. So we sit in the pews because we feel like Jesus is going to be in these pews, and we make those checklists. Oh, I went to church twice this week, going to heaven. Oh, I went to church for Easter and Christmas. I'm religious. See, we rush through the motions of what it means to be a Christian. We look for Jesus, but yet we don't see him. So we continue to look in the same places. Jesus was right in front of the people. He was able to reach out and shake hands. And John's saying, still you did not receive him. It's like Brian and Kurt and some of those other, in case he can vouch for me, I'm not a very good golfer. And I golf with Mike over at First Baptist. We're golfing partners, 2 preachers. Gotta love it. And Mike, now I shouldn't say this. Don't tell Mike I said this. Mike has a short fuse when I cannot find my golf ball. And that happens quite frequently. So every other week, we take turns driving. One time it's my turn to drive the cart. The next time it's Mike's. And whenever it's my time and we lose a golf ball, I have this habit of flooring that golf cart, driving around in 118 circles looking for my golf ball. And Mike says, just stop. So I'll stop. By this time, Mike's usually pretty annoyed. And I stop, and we look. And probably 9 times out of 10, by just being patient, by just sitting and watching, we find my golf ball. See, that's what John's saying. Sometimes we drive around in circles looking for Jesus and trying to find him. Sometimes we walk all the way around a set trying to find Jesus when there's signs that say, just slow down. Stop. And Jesus will be right in front of you. He will reveal yourself. Instead of spinning circles around this life, just stop. Just slow down. That's what we need to experience Jesus. Now, the last illustration I want to nail here before we close is, some of you will understand this illustration and some of you will not. Who here remembers when there was a Krispy Kreme in Sioux Falls? And I'm not talking about the little girls selling Krispy Kreme donuts on Western and 41st. I'm talking about the real Krispy Kreme. Who remembers that? Yeah, you're going to get this illustration. So a little known secret about Krispy Kreme is you could go into Krispy Kreme and get a sample. You could sample whatever flavored donut you wanted for free. They would give you a donut. Now, me and my buddies, this was when we were in high school, we toured every college in Sioux Falls so we could go to Krispy Kreme and get a free donut. But in that, there was something more about going to Krispy Kreme and experiencing that donut. Now, if you went there, you'll understand it, because when you got that donut, and it was the fresh dough, it was soft in the middle, crispy on the outside, that fresh glazed chocolate on the top, if you like the chocolate flavor like me. And when you bit into it, you could smell the dough in the back being made. You could see the people literally making the donuts. There was something about that experience that changed the way we look at Krispy Kreme. Now, I went and bought some Krispy Kreme fundraiser donuts a couple years back. And I thought to myself, oh, these are going to be so good. And I ran them home and I put one in the microwave for 15 seconds. And I got it out and I put it in my mouth. And I said, this is gross. I don't know if Krispy Kreme donuts are really that good at all, but there was something about the experience of being there, of touching, of seeing the donuts being made. And now here John is saying, experience Jesus yourself. Don't just go and buy the day-old Jesus. Don't just have the Jesus that's been boxed up and people tell you how good it is. Go and experience the touch, the taste, the feel, all the senses. Go and experience how Jesus can change your life. Go and experience how life changes around him. Go and see broken hearts that Jesus has fixed. Go and let Jesus fix your broken heart. Go and see the people who Jesus has wiped away their tears, and then let Jesus wipe away your own tears. That is what John is saying. In order for you to know Jesus, you have to experience Jesus. In John 1:49, Nathanael is talking here. He says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Today may be that day when you're walking down the street and you pass someone famous, and that someone famous could be Jesus. He could be walking along like the rest of us. Because one thing I can be certain as I preach up here, Jesus is coming. And you have the greatest, the best opportunity right now, right today, to not only peek over that wall and see the set and see the things, but to truly experience it. To not only hear stories about how good Krispy Kreme was, but to truly experience it. Because once you recognize that experience, once you have that, you will know that it's truly worth saying, I want to get to know you, and I want to change my life for you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I pray that somewhere in the midst of the chaos of the world you are here, that you are with us, and that you are present with us. You are walking alongside of us, still reaching out to us. And I pray that we have an experience, that you change us, that you move us, that you help bring us to places that we see your work in each and every day. I pray that you continue to provide us with touch and feel and sight to ultimately experience what it is to know you, Lord. Pray that as we go from here, that our experience doesn't end, that as worship ends, we continue to worship you in our homes, that we experience you each and every day of our lives. In this I pray, amen. Please stand if you are able and join me in singing our praise song, Open the Eyes of My Heart.
my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want